We're gathered here today because the internet is in turmoil. But then again, when is it not? I came across a tweet the other day that you might have also came across because it went, as the kids say, viral. So the young woman who wrote the tweet went into hospital for a blood test. And in her tweet, she wrote, "Hello HR, is that you?" And a screenshot of an Instagram message that she received that says, "Hey, this might seem a bit odd, but I done your blood test the other day at hospital. I thought you were good looking and seemed nice, so here I am shooting my shot." At the time of me filming this, it's got over 13,000 retweets and comments and 83,000 likes. So this tweet caught my attention for a number of reasons. The first reason is that I think that that is shocking that any sort of medical professional would do that. I definitely see where this girl is coming from. I would not like to be in her position. I would not like it if that happened to me. I also found this interesting because there was so much conflict in the replies to this tweet and people quote tweeting it, and people are in such disagreement because people have such different views. And most of the people that I've seen sort of interacting with this tweet are probably like millennial age, like in their 20s, early 30s. Obviously there's going to be some difference. There's going to be some younger and some older people interacting with this tweet as well. But it really made me think that there is such a clash in ideas and boundaries within the culture that we live in. I wanted to talk about it in today's video and talk about why I and so many people think that what this guy did is inappropriate, and then also discuss why people think it's not inappropriate. So first of all, let's go through some of the replies to the tweet and just see the variation of opinions on this matter. It's not appropriate what he's done, but he's hardly violated you. He's just overstepped the mark and has been a bit daft. Should have cut the lad some slack and messaged him privately to say he shouldn't do that as it's against policy. Absolutely ruined someone's career now. The fact that people don't view this as wrong really concerns me. He's not only breached his patient's data protection, he's also misused her information for his own personal benefit. What if he was her reoccurring doctor? He would have completely blurred the line between professional and personal. Just take it as a compliment the guy wanted to ask you out. It's either yes or no. No need for the silly shouts of get him... What? No need for the silly shouts of get him sacked. I do not see an issue here. He was polite, not rude in any way. Just reply and tell him you're not interested. I presume this would have been okay if he was an attractive man. This is interesting. I'm going to talk about that in a sec. Oh, come on, it's not really a bad thing. I bet that if your grandparents told you that's how they met, would be like, oh, that's so sweet. He liked her so much, he did everything to find her, blah, blah, blah. How can anyone defend him? He's literally taken her medical records and looked her up online to try and date her. This happened to me when a paramedic tries it, and it honestly scares you. The people who are supposed to make you feel safe do stuff like this. He's totally in the wrong for breaching her confidentiality. However, you're totally in the wrong for doing the exact same back to him, yet on an even larger, more public scale. He's a creep who breached privacy. You're an attention seeker who breached privacy. Hashtag hypocrite. So hopefully that's given you an idea of the wide variety of takes. Straight away, one might assume that the people defending this man are also men and the people defending the woman are also women. But I actually saw a variety of genders defending each person. Maybe there were like more men defending the man, but there were also a lot of women defending him as well. So the first thing about this situation is that the nurse or whoever he was, I'm not sure, the medical professional who sent that Instagram message, he obviously did breach patient confidentiality. It doesn't really matter whether he went rummaging through her medical records or whether he just remembered her name and searched it up on Instagram. He still breached some sort of boundary there. Someone made a good point on Twitter saying that a person in the medical field will have done training about stuff like this. He would have had training about how this is inappropriate and shouldn't be done. And it's interesting that that isn't really what people are debating. Everyone's kind of in agreement that he did breach some sort of privacy. He did overstep some sort of boundary. But a lot of people are saying that that's okay. And then a lot of people are saying, well, no, it's not okay because you overstepped a boundary. For some people, overstepping boundaries isn't something to make a big deal about. This guy obviously broke some rules and regulations of his workplace, yet some people are saying that it's okay. Even though the guy did something wrong, the girl should just sit and accept that he's done something wrong. And I think going down that path is a really slippery slope, because when does it stop? How far past the boundary does someone have to step before we actually do something about it, before we stop trying to talk to them privately about it and explain what they've done wrong and be kind and patient? When does that stop? When have they crossed the boundaries so far that we can then go to HR, or that we can then write a public tweet about it? At what point past the boundary are we allowed to do those things? And I think it's odd that we live in a culture that accepts that at all. Like, our culture does accept that we can cross people's boundaries and there should be no sort of repercussion of that. And like I said, it's a slippery slope, because where does that stop? So one person said that this woman should have cut the lad some slack and messaged him privately to say he shouldn't do that as it's against policy. I'm wondering why this person thinks that it's the woman's responsibility to tell a man that she doesn't know how to do his job and what is and what isn't against the rules. And it's really quite strange, because this man is in his job. He should know what is and what isn't against the rules. I don't really see it as the woman's responsibility to remind him nicely of the rules. But clearly people agree with this take. People clearly agree in this specific scenario it was the woman's responsibility to remind the man of the rules. I think that is very similar to this thing of not wanting to ruin men's careers, right? We hear that so much in the news about rape cases that are going to court, about how this man's life is now going to be ruined because the woman chose to be loud about something that happened to her. That kind of goes with what I was saying before. When does it stop? When do we actually enforce repercussions around stepping over boundaries? Because we go down this path that it's women's responsibility to not damage a man's reputation or a man's career, even if something bad has happened to her. So now let's look at it from a different kind of angle. If the young woman who received this Instagram message was my friend, and she was like, hey, I've got this message from this guy that did my blood test, it's a bit weird, and eventually she decided that she was just going to message him back and say, this is inappropriate, please don't message me again, and that was that. The guy's work never found out, there was no public tweet made about it, nothing, no repercussions for this guy, right? I would totally support that. I wouldn't be like, you have to go to HR, you have to inform his employers, you have to write a public tweet about it. I think that what a lot of people are saying that she could have, or I mean, they're saying she should have, just replied back to him saying, I don't want anything with you. I think that that is like actually a perfectly acceptable thing to do, even though that would then mean no real heavy repercussions for the guy. I think where my line of thought differs to a lot of these people's is that I don't think that that young woman should be expected to behave like that. I don't think that should be the expected response. Having a nice quiet word with the guy who breached patient confidentiality so that he doesn't lose his job, I don't think that that should be her expected response. It could be a response. She could totally do that and it would be fine. But the fact that we have this sort of, why do we expect that to be the woman's response? Why is it wrong for her to go to HR? And people might say, well, it's because it's not really a big of a deal. Yes, he breached confidentiality, but it wasn't that bad. And that goes back to what I was saying before. How far do we have to be past the boundary for things to be really bad? Now, if we're being really realistic, I can agree that this isn't the biggest, most extravagant breach of patient confidentiality that I'm sure there has ever been in the world, right? I can still acknowledge that it is still past the boundary, even if it's not miles and miles past it. Does that make sense? If we have drawn a boundary as a society to say that people who are in jobs where they have access to others' information, they cannot use that information for their own gain, or they cannot take that information away past the workplace. If we've drawn a boundary as a society that says doctors and teachers and police officers cannot be mingling romantically with the people they're serving, then we should respect that boundary, right? Should we not then stick to that? And if we think that we shouldn't be sticking to that boundary, maybe it's outdated or maybe it's not helpful, don't we need like an overall sort of reform in these boundaries and these rules and regulations for workplaces? Do you see what I'm saying? I think in this situation, what goes hand in hand with the slightly overstepping of boundaries is that a lot of people are saying it's a compliment. This guy obviously found this young woman attractive, thought she was nice, clearly wanted something romantic / sexual from her. So that's a compliment, right? I don't know how this young woman who received the message was feeling. Maybe she was somewhat flattered that a guy thought that she was attractive. It's always nice, no matter what gender or sexuality you are, it's always nice for someone else to find you attractive. It kind of gives you a bit of a confidence boost. But what's interesting about the people that think it should be taken as a compliment is that they don't only think it should be taken as a compliment, but they somehow connect that to the guy having no repercussions at all. Like I said, I don't know how this girl felt. Maybe in some way it gave her a confidence boost. Again, I don't know, maybe it didn't, but for the sake of this point, maybe it did, right? She can be flattered and also acknowledge that it is inappropriate and think that this man should have repercussions because of his actions. Again, with the it's a compliment thing, I think a lot of people are assuming, and maybe a lot of men do this because they can see themselves in the man, but they are assuming that this guy had purely good intentions. We see this a lot with the hashtag not all men thing, right? Different genders support that, but it's a lot of it is men championing the hashtag not all men thing. And I think it's because if you are a good man, you have a hard time understanding that sometimes other men are not good. So a lot of the men on Twitter who are defending this guy possibly might see themselves in him and might be thinking, well, surely he just found her attractive and just wanted to take her on a date. There was nothing more insidious or nothing more dangerous about it. And this is the thing I think that women always try and say. There's some sort of a miscommunication happening because people don't really seem to listen. We don't know the intentions of this guy. It's just like when women say, when they're out at night walking in the street and there's a guy walking towards them, they might cross the road to feel a little bit safer. The hashtag not all men people will say, you're overreacting. Like, what are the chances he's gonna do something to you? It's not all men, it's not all men, you're generalizing. But the thing is that women don't know. If there's a man walking towards me on my side of the street late at night when it's dark, I have no idea who that is. He could be a completely harmless, nice guy who maybe is even conscious of the fact that I might feel as a woman uncomfortable walking past him. Or he could be someone that's a lot more dangerous. And a lot of people go back to the fact that this happened on Instagram. It didn't happen in real life. It started in real life though. It did start with him invading her personal bubble, as a medical person has to do when they're taking your blood. It's the element of not knowing at all who you're dealing with. Is this man a stalker? Don't know. People are forgetting that this young woman isn't just a character that spawned onto Twitter in the past week or so. She's a real woman with past experiences. What if she's had past experiences with stalkers before? What if that made her really on edge receiving a message from someone that is a medical professional at her hospital? I think to say it would be okay if it was an attractive man is a really interesting take, because maybe it would have been. I don't know the young woman at all, so I have absolutely no idea what she's like. And maybe in her case, it wouldn't have made an ounce of difference whether he was attractive or not. But I personally know a bunch of women that hate it when men approach them on a night out in a club, and hate it when men kind of touch them as they're speaking to them, but they usually only hate it when they don't find the guy attractive. If they find the guy attractive, then that's okay. They have a different set of boundaries and a different set of expectations for different people, and I think it's an issue that definitely needs to be talked about, and clearly men are thinking about it too. I do think that in this situation it is a little bit irrelevant or a little bit distracting to write a tweet saying, I presume this would have been okay if he was an attractive man, because that's you presuming she didn't find him attractive. She might have found him extremely attractive and still found it inappropriate. It's kind of just assuming that any time a woman might complain about a man's behaviour, it's because she doesn't find him attractive, which isn't the case for every woman at all. Similar to having double standards for attractive men and not attractive men is the idea that this would be a totally different thing if the genders were reversed, which I saw a lot of people saying. I wonder what they mean by that. What would be totally different? If it was a woman taking a man's blood and then used his information to find him on Instagram and send him a message, what about that would have been different? Would the man's reaction to the Instagram message been different? Or are you saying if the man also put it on Twitter for everyone to see, would everyone else's reactions be different? I don't know, of course, because I'm literally no authority to speak on it. It's just my opinion from my experience of being in the world. But I do think it's more likely, not 100% likely, but more likely for that man to not feel as invaded by that. Probably would recognize it as a bit inappropriate, but he might not feel as unsafe. I think that might be a reflection on wider culture that we live in. Just look at the statistics and evidence around stalking and who's doing the stalking and who's on the receiving end of them. This isn't to say that women are all wonderful and don't hurt anyone, because that's just not true. That would be incorrect for anyone to say that women are more in danger of things like stalking, sexual harassment, rape, various other violent crimes. And I love it when I see men on social media championing other men, saying, you know, like, if you have been the victim of some sort of sexual assault and you're a man, come forwards, tell someone, you are not alone, you are not weak. I love it when I see men supporting men in this way, and I think that we need more of that, honestly. But I do think it's disingenuous to say that most men would feel as threatened in this situation as a lot of women would. The grandparents thing is a really interesting take, and I actually think he's right, but clearly I look at it from a different kind of angle to what he does. He's kind of saying that if we heard this is how our grandparents met, we would have thought it was so romantic, so therefore this woman shouldn't be complaining on Twitter about it happening now. Whereas I think if we heard that this is how our grandparents met, we would have thought it was so romantic, and that shows the shift in culture on what we find acceptable and where our boundaries lie, and that's a good thing. So I agree with him, but we're clearly looking at it from two different places. I think that when we hear stories about our grandparents or even our parents, because the world was such a different place when they were in their 20s and early 30s, things that were the norm, things that were acceptable, was so much different. We don't want to be stuck back in those days, surely. So I think we've discussed a lot so far, and the last thing I want to touch on is whether this young woman should have put this on social media at all. People have called her attention seeking for doing so, which honestly, it's kind of a difficult one to talk about, I think, because isn't anything attention seeking? Like me wearing this top right now, you can kind of see my boobs in it. You could call that attention seeking. You could call the fact that I'm making a video and putting it on the internet attention seeking. You could call the fact that I put a selfie on Instagram attention seeking. You can literally call anything attention seeking, including the replies in the thread of that tweet. The guy in that reply did say that she's an attention seeker who's breached privacy. I don't think that the guy's Instagram handle was even included in the message, so it's not exactly like she's told thousands and thousands of people his Instagram username. But then there is the conversation around the ethics of exposing like screenshots of DMs at all. Is it ethical? I mean, probably not. Like, if you're DMing somebody, you're assuming that that DM is staying with them only. You're assuming that they're not going to go and show it around or screenshot it and put it on social media. And that's not something that's a rule or a regulation, but that's kind of, again, a boundary that our culture has kind of drawn up. It's not written, it's not defined anywhere, but we kind of understand that if you're talking to someone in a DM, you want that to stay between you and that person. But then in this situation, it's kind of difficult because this girl's boundary had been crossed. So I suppose maybe she just felt like, well, I guess we're all just fucking boundaries from now on. I don't necessarily agree with an eye for an eye, but I understand it. And I think the people that are calling her a hypocrite, I think it's kind of strange because it's like saying that we've never done something similar ourselves. Like, we've never been wronged by someone and then also done something wrong back to them. It's kind of like when you're little and your parents say 2 wrongs don't make a right. We've all done behaviour that is similar to that. So I find it strange that people are in the replies to that tweet calling her a hypocrite as if they're on some righteous high horse. I also do think that it's a bit of a tactic to make this girl feel bad. Like, people feel so aligned with the man in this situation. Calling her a hypocrite is just another way to tear this woman down without really examining why you feel like so aligned with this man. Is it because you've done behaviour similar and you're worried that if this man's getting branded a creep, then that also brands you a creep? So you're really kind of defensive. Thanks for watching this video. I kind of want to do more stuff like this on my channel. This video was never really meant to have like a definitive answer or a definitive point to it. I just find it really interesting when there's like a heated debate or such a varying difference in opinions on one thing. I encourage you to leave your thoughts in the comments down below, but be respectful. I've tried really hard to be respectful in this video, so please be respectful down in the comments below. Give this video a like and subscribe to my channel if you want to, and I will see you again in my next video. Bye.